We have Jeff Ross with us today, and he has a special lesson. They're all special, aren't they? And he comes from Dahlonega every time he comes down to church, so he's one of those 400 that we run up and down all the time, and we hope he stays safe. Having traveled 400, we know how bad that is getting to be. He has well, I'm going to let him talk. He's already here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. It's always good to be with y'all and share this time together. So just a quick update. I'm still working with pastoral care. We've got a great team. Richard Long does a terrific job, and Tony Fagan and Laura, our new folks, all help out. We've got folks at the different assisted living places that help, and then the best part, though, is what y'all do. We keep up with some of the emails that y'all send out, connecting folks, the prayers that y'all had today for people, keeping up with the people in your class, and we try not to interfere with that, but come alongside of that and help. So it's nice that we've got such good teams. Stephen ministers also plug in. And then a quick shout out to the Hills. I've got two folks, Mary Brooks and David Hills, that have asked me for people they can call. And so I know David used to be a Stephen minister, and so I've got some folks that can't get out much or can't get around and just need some encouragement. And so David calls the guys and Mary Brooks calls the women, and they both have 3 or 4 folks that they keep in touch with. And so that's a huge blessing too. And so I'm pleased to be a part of that team and those folks. I spent most of January down in St. Augustine. That was a lot of fun, and it worked out really well because I actually had we left January 5th and came back February 5th, but y'all had a snow day and an ice day, so really I only missed 2 weeks, so I can take those later in the year. I floated that by Tom, and he said, well, after June, I'm gone, do it every year. So, and on that note, yes, I've had a lot of folks ask me, because y'all know that Tom and I have been friends for a while. Yes, I am planning to stay and be of as much help as I can to whoever's coming in. And I think that that could work out well.
Jeff,
but yes.
On behalf of the class, we're glad you're staying.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I know that as I've come in different places and different churches, it's sometimes you look at the team that you inherit, and it's a great fit, and sometimes not so much. And so the person coming in, it's. I've been hearing people talk about, well, we need somebody who can do this and somebody who can do this. And the job description is growing to the point I don't think anybody can do that. But I hope they're self-aware enough to know that, hopefully they know their gifts and skills and abilities and passions and interests. And then they can build a team around that. I don't do this well. We need to hire somebody for that and be able to do that, because everybody isn't good at everything. And so what are they good at, and who do they need to help them be successful? And I know that's part of your job, and my job is to help that. So if I can be helpful, great. If not, that's okay too. The nice thing is I've been around the conference for a long time, so I probably know this person pretty well, and so I'm excited about that. Susan Gunter and I, because she worked as assistant to the bishop for a little bit, we've been talking about people that we both like and are hoping for. So we'll see. No, I do not know who's coming. I'll learn that with y'all. But there are some really terrific folks around the conference, and a lot of folks I'd love to work with. So all of that said, Nancy reached out and said if I could come and teach this on this day, and then reminded me that it's Black History Month, so kind of what's going on with the United Methodist Church. And so I want to do that kind of in two ways. One is kind of just ramble about some things, and then share a story of a preacher that's had a lot of influence on me, and kind of talk about his story and a little bit about that. So interesting, one of the things I did was, when Nancy mentioned that, is I looked up, okay, so the disaffiliation, where did most of our African American congregations go? Did they stay with the United Methodist Church, or go somewhere else? And it's interesting, the predominantly black churches in the U.S. chose to stay. Only 1.6% disaffiliating. And this is, I don't know who this was written by, but there was a little parenthetical statement that went with that. The reason for staying, observers note that the black congregations were generally not interested in joining a movement led largely by white Southern men.
Southern what?
Men. And so it wasn't their fight, and so they've stayed with the church. So that the studies confirm on the back end of that the churches that left were roughly 97% white, which is kind of an interesting dive into the whole thing. I don't know. I don't go to any conference things. I'm not really sure of where we're headed or what we're doing. I am impressed with our bishop, Robin Dees. She's been our bishop for a few years. She has the enormous task right now. When I came into the conference 40-something years ago, North and South Georgia were the same conference. And then we split not long after I got on board, and now we're in the process of merging back together. So our bishop, Bishop Dees, is already the bishop from North and South Georgia, and they're separate. Annual conference last year and this year are having conversations about joining the two conferences. She grew up in Brooklyn, was one of 13 children, was a pastor and district superintendent in South Carolina, and has an immense task of navigating the North and South Georgia conferences and trying to figure out what that looks like, joining services and organizations and making that run more smoothly. You may remember, some of those of y'all that have been around for a little bit, Mike Long and Tom Davis and I were a part of a continuing education group. We went to Australia, we went to Seattle, New York, as we were looking at worship practices. And so you might remember Mike being gone and maybe talking a little bit about that. One of the people that went with us, it was a group of 8. It was funded by the Lilly Foundation and a little bit from our churches. And so there were 8 of us, and we got to design our own continuing education experience. And one of the people in that group was Steve Dodson, yes, and also Olu Brown. Olu was the pastor of the Impact United Methodist Church, downtown Atlanta, African-American pastor, and grew that church from himself to about 6,000-7,000 people Olu's been speaking all over the country about that process and how he did that, and great guy. And maybe you've seen his name in the news recently. He's running for governor. So from a United Methodist Church to governor, that's not a easy step, but it speaks to Olu's organizational abilities and talents. And so we've had a few conversations about that. He said that I think in March is some sort of qualifying event, and then in May, evidently, is a beginning primary where I guess they'll run and we'll see who the top Democratic candidates are. And if he makes that, he said then he gets a lot of state money, which would be helpful in his campaign. But Olu's a great guy. And so I think the challenges facing the African American congregations are much like what we're facing. The money that we were talking about when I came in, where's that coming from? How's that look? And then worship services. I think that's been, my whole ministry, that's been a bit of a challenge. What does worship look like? If you do a specific kind of worship, will people come to that? Do we get rid of what we're doing to accommodate what we think is out there? Or do we just continue to do what we do really well? And so it's been interesting here over the last couple of years to watch y'all already mentioned the Nest and the God's Gardener classes. We've got young adult classes that are coming to church. They're excited about being here. They're diving into children's ministry and children's choir and our youth program. And so there was not too distant past tons and tons of voices saying that our traditional worship service focus won't last. You've got to change. You've got to go all modern and everything else. But we resisted that. I say we. I didn't have anything to do with that. Tom resisted that, and some of y'all as you worked together and looked at all of that. And we're seeing a huge response to that. And so that's been fun to see. So I wanted to share with y'all a little bit about a guy named John Jasper. John Jasper is a...
The camera's right there.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that'll come up. Good, thanks. John Jasper, born in 1812, died in 1901. And I'll get around in a little while to why I want to talk about him. But I got this resource. I don't even know now where I got it, but I got it years and years ago. It's called 20 Centuries of Great Preaching. Is that what it's called? Yeah. And this is volume 4. It's a 10-volume set of books. And it has every 100 years, it breaks down some of the leading pastors, preachers from that era. And so you can go back and you can read. It's fascinating to me. I don't know how many of y'all love reading old sermons, but it's fascinating to me. What were they talking about during the Civil War? How did they preach about that? What were pastors talking about from the pulpit on Sunday when the Civil War was raging, when World War I was raging, when the pandemic of 19 whatever was raging in World War II? One of the sermons I've got from a guy named Phillips Brooks starts off, as we gather for worship today, the body of our slain president, Lincoln, is laying in state in the city. And you go, oh my gosh, what do you say during that time? And so it's just fascinating to me to go back and sort of look. And then the other thing that's fascinating to me about this is how did they preach? What was the style of preaching? Because that's changed a lot over the years. And then who were the people who began to make those changes? How were they received? What was the process from going to a different style of preaching? And even in terms of sort of content or focus, some super evangelical. One of the books I took on vacation and read was a book about Billy Sunday. Does anybody have heard that name? Billy Sunday was a baseball player, got converted. He says he was a baseball player, and he talks about some of the other baseball players. One of his good friends was the catcher on his team. And this is, I guess, early 1900s. Billy Sunday? No. Yeah, early 1900s, I guess. And the catcher caught with no glove, with no mask, and no chest protector. So, just like this, squatting down behind a batter, trying to catch a fastball with, I mean, they maybe didn't throw as fast as Spencer Strider does, but still pretty fast. Billy Sunday said this catcher, every bone in his face had been broken at least once.
He had no teeth.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Maybe they wore a mouth guard.
He must have been hit in the head a couple of times.
To even want to get back there and do that, yes. And so anyway, Billy Sunday was an evangelist. He hated drinking because that's what God saved him from. He hated dancing, and he railed on the Methodists because they would have dances in their fellowship hall. And he figured they were as bad as any heathens. It's funny to read some of the. So all of that is kind of captured in these. And so it has a brief biography. It has some of the commentary from different people about their reputation and what they meant and how the world saw them. And then they have samples of their sermons. And so if you go through the book, this book, so this is 1801 to looks like 1901. So 100 years, 1801, 1901. And you read the other sermons, all scholarly white folks, as was typical early 1800s, even back to John Wesley, so 1700s, into the middle 1900s, the preaching style was to take a verse okay, so here's an example. Every man's life, a plan of God. And there's one verse, and it might not even be a full verse. I girded thee, though thou hast not known me. Isaiah 45:5. And this was super typical of 150 years of preaching. They would take that verse, and then the sermon was kind of a mixture of philosophy and ideology, but it never, hardly ever was, did it go in and say, okay, what Isaiah's talking about starting in the 40th chapter and going through the 50th chapter is this. Here's what's going on in Israel during that time, and Isaiah was this person and that, and this is what Isaiah did and thought, and so they would never give you any sort of context. They would use that verse and the idea of the verse to launch out onto something. And in many cases, the minister, especially in some of these college towns and other places, big cities, where some of the most well-educated people of the day. And so people would come to learn and to listen and to see what they had to say. Sometimes it was electric and exciting and all. One of the biggest name preachers, Jonathan Edwards, he wrote a sermon called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. It's probably in preacher circles one of the most famous sermons ever. It talks about God's disdain for any sort of sin and God's almost complete disdain for you and me. And it's only by God's grace, which if God could go back and fix that, he would have taken away. It's only by this promise of grace that keeps God from destroying the world a second time. And so Jonathan Edwards, who I think was the president of Princeton for a while.
Yale, I think. Yale.
Yale. A small guy, bad eyesight, and they said when he preached his sermon, he read it kind of down like this. But the response during the sermon, it was people got so repentant as he spoke that they would come down long before he even finished to pray and weep and wail at the altar. And it's always been fascinating to me how people respond because as a preacher, I think I have to do so much. I have to be animated, I have to be funny, I have to have clever stories, I have to, dress nice, all of those things that I have to do so that you'll respond to the message that God's given me, when in fact, God moves and works in people's hearts in ways that really I have nothing to do with. It's God that's at work in people's lives. And so that's fascinating. So John Jasper is a different kind of fellow. He starts off as a slave. It says that his first task as a slave came at the age of 8. He was in Virginia. He grew up in that environment. It says that for the first 40 years he was a slave. Then the Civil War was over and he was freed. In the second 40 years he was free. He became a pastor along the way, got converted. A fellow slave taught him to read. And as he got converted, he just sort of made a pact with God. I'll do what you want me to do. Just give me a love and an understanding of your word. And so it's fascinating as you read through here, the middle and late 1800s in and around Richmond, Virginia, the power, the scope, the reputation of John Jasper's preaching and leadership, but it was nothing like how everybody else was preaching. He had a kind of a broken Southern slave dialect. They said he didn't pronounce words. He just butchered the English language. He had all kinds of phrases and things. Thankfully for us, Jasper had a very understanding master, Samuel Hardgrove, who was a member of the First Baptist Church in Richmond and a deacon. All the records indicate that he was a devout Christian. When he heard of Jasper's conversion, he gave him the rest of the day off so that he could share the good news with all his relatives and friends. He rejoiced at Jasper's experience because he had watched Jasper's wildness with deep anguish and had prayed that God would change his life. He started off not as a preacher, but as sort of the speaker for the funerals of his fellow slaves. There's a record of him coming up to lead the congregational prayer at the end of one of the funerals. And as he finished the prayer, the white people said, "From now on, we want to hear John Jasper." And soon, Jasper was in demand for every Negro funeral within traveling distance. His preaching was attended by fainting women, shouting, and general bedlam. Sometimes for hours after the sermon, many were still entranced and a few lying about as if they were dead. Jasper preached with such eloquence that his hearers were ready to crown Christ Lord of all right then and there. His preaching was so attractive that some of the white ministers began to miss a few of their flock. When told that the people were going to hear a Negro preacher, one of the ministers angrily declared that God did not ordain Negroes to preach. But he attended one of the meetings and upon returning said, "I have attended the services of John Jasper's church this afternoon. Jasper is great. He's the only one that I would ordain to preach the gospel." After his emancipation, Jasper gathered a congregation and was preaching to several thousand people every Sunday. He was the pastor of the 6th Mount Zion Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia. I always love the titles of some of these churches. The 6th Mount Zion Baptist Church. Does that mean there was a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they didn't do so good, or this was a better one? It says, the number of white persons who came to hear Jasper preach was so large that a section was reserved for them. Jasper often joked with the white listeners, "Now look here, y'all. You all white people, you keep over in your section. Don't get in the places of the regular customers." It's funny, so, and it's fascinating to me, too, that in this era, 150 years, give or take, Phillips Brooks is one of my favorite pastors. He was towards the end of Jasper's time, late 1800s to early 1900s. He preached in Boston, Trinity Episcopal Church, I believe. And they said that when he preached, the sanctuary, which is massive, couldn't contain it. People would stand outside. Harry Emerson Fosdick in New York, same thing. People would line up outside, peer through the windows. I can only imagine what that would be like. As we're gathered in here, y'all announced that I was going to be teaching. We had to open the windows because people were out there peering in just to hear the voice. John Jasper's fame was that way. And so what was it about his preaching and kind of the context for what I wanted to share with you today? So the preaching style for, and if you go back, I think this series starts in the 1st century after Jesus. And as much as we have records of what people preached and how they preached, you know, it's interesting to see what the style was. But this style, one verse, launching into ideology and philosophy and a little bit of religion and sort of moral guidance, I guess, is how you would classify a lot of what was at that time. So what was it about Jasper that white folks were coming over, had their own section? What was it that thousands of people came to? Well, the nice thing is that it has 4 or 5 of his sermons that have been transcribed and put down. And they're all stories. It's the story of Daniel, the story of Abraham, the story of Moses. It's stories. And he tells the story almost in the first person of what would have been going on. What were they thinking? You have to fill in the blanks a lot. But he would take these Old Testament, New Testament stories, and you would get into the story with the people. It's a wonderful story of Eve deciding whether or not to eat the apple. What was going through her mind? What was the conversation with the snake all about? What did that look like? How did that feel? And it's both funny, but also super enlightening about human nature, the things that grab us, the same sort of moral decline and struggle with sin that the other preachers were talking about it, but in a whole new voice. And so people were hearing these stories of the Old and New Testament come alive. They were actually hearing the stories of the Old and New Testaments, not just an obscure verse from Isaiah 45:5. It was, here's the story, and here's what was happening, and here was the struggle and the battle and the human elements of all of that, and then here's how that was resolved, and then this is what it means for you and me. Don't you have that same struggle? Don't you have the same battle? Don't you have the same conversation with God? And all of a sudden, those stories that were dead came alive. And he did it with such, they said that his preaching was animated, full of gestures and laughter, but that he was able to turn that around to drive home. He was very evangelistic. He had been converted about 30 years old, and had come out of the background that he did, and he was able to communicate the truth. And when you read through the sermons, there's a sense of an incredible grasp of the scriptures. He not only talks about Adam and Eve, but he brings in how the story is impacted in other parts of the Bible. It's not just focused on that one story and all you get is just the essence of that story. He's able to weave in themes and threads that run through the whole Bible. It was remarkable. Where did he get this education? But he says it was just his prayer. God, if you want me to do this, you've got to give me this, an understanding of the Bible, a way of seeing it. You know, different people have that gift in math or in music or in whatever. They can just see it. They can hear in their head how the composition is supposed to sound and what each section is supposed to do. They can just hear that. They can feel it. And that's just a gift. I mean, it's not something you can teach somebody. And so for me, you've heard me preach a few times, I love that idea of taking a story and what's going on? What are they thinking? What's behind that? What is Paul and Peter talking about? Where does that come from? What's the background of that? How does that thread come together? And what does it look like? And so up until John Jasper's time, and he's not the only one, but there was this transition at least available to preachers. Here's somebody who's doing this style, and it's different than Phillips Brooks, and it's different than some of these other folks. It's different than Jonathan Edwards. It's different than John Wesley. But look at the response. And so that's part of what we do today, right? Why is that church doing so well? What is that preacher doing? What is the sermon like? It has to be something in that people are attracted to. And so how do I model that? Or how do I learn that? Or how can I try that? One of the professors that Mike and Tom and I had at Candler was Fred Craddock. And Fred was so popular to all of the students in our day. And the funny thing is, we'd all sit in his class, read his books, and then we go back to our churches and try to preach like Fred. Oh, and it was a disaster. A couple of folks could pull it off. But for most of us, it was a disaster. Fred would set up this whole story, and then at the end, it was kind of like a drop the mic moment, where he would come all the way back around, make a statement, and sit down. And you were left going, oh my God. And so all of us were trying to do the same thing. And we'd get to the end of the sermon and, say that phrase, and people would go, what? It was just, you take all that's out there and you have to develop your own style. What are your gifts and what are your abilities and talents and all of those kinds of things? But John Jasper and some of those folks gave me the freedom to be able to take a story and put it together and realize that's okay. That's not how Mike preaches, that's not how Tom preaches, not how Malone preaches, not how somebody else preaches, but that's the gift, the ability, the passion that I have. Because if a preacher doesn't preach with some amount of passion, oh gosh, we're all going to be bored to tears. So what is it that's bubbling up in me? What is my story? And how do I communicate that story? What's bubbling up in me? What are the questions that I bring to that scripture? What is it that's popping up? So I'm thankful for, again, I don't know even how I got this series, but just the opportunity over the years to read, you'd hear about something in history and I'd go, oh my gosh, what were they saying about that? And then what were the styles that people used? And then how can I read that and be free to pursue that? And so this was a different kind of preaching, and it talks about some of the criticism that John Jasper took, because it wasn't what was normal, it wasn't what was the right way to do it, it wasn't the educated, sophisticated way to communicate and to talk, but he pulled it off, and evidently it touched a chord with people and people's lives. And so, I don't know, that'll be interesting as our new person arrives. What is their style? How do they go about it? How do they tell stories? What is that process like? And for both them coming into a new place and for new listeners to hear, and what you hear in those stories that you didn't hear from somebody else, because it's just a new voice. And you just hear things in a different way. So anyway, a lot to look forward to. Thanks.
Thank you. That was a great lesson, and actually brought up some memories for me. But I was born in deep South Georgia, southeast Georgia, and I have actually been to some of the people of color, their worship services, just out of curiosity when I was a young teenager and could drive. I was driving. And worship, it was the people of color's worship. It's the way they worship. It was different than mine, but it was worship, and it was true worship. And I've always appreciated that. And I have been to Osteen's to eat too, and many times in St. Augustine. So everybody have a good, just a real good week, and call somebody, visit somebody, appreciate it. All have a good week. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.